So I think it's still morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
It's such a beautiful day. I am happy to have you shift your position and turn this way if you would like, and move closer if you're on a chair. Feel free. Similar to what I read earlier today, I have absolutely no idea where I am, what day it is, where I was, or where I will be. And, you know, I think it was last weekend that Obon occurred. That's probably one of the reasons. Obon was extraordinary. It always is. It's the ceremony in which we create beautiful lanterns and write the names and recite the names of those we've lost. And then float the lanterns on the lake at night and have a bonfire. And there's always some Dharma drama happening with regard to Daibosatsu's arrangements, let's say, and the weather. And this time was quite unusual because we had about 3/4 of those who were attending the Friday, Saturday services come early. They decided to come and help out. And so we were doing Mizu Sagaki every night, a special chanting for the deceased. After the first night, when we had maybe 15 or 20 people, it kept growing. So the second night we did it, the third night, and Friday night, the big opening fire night, we had almost our full complement of people there. And people had learned how to do it, or they were old timers, they knew what to do. So it was very smooth, and all of the altars had been made ready ahead of time, and all the banners were flying, and it was just such an incredibly rich and intense, and yet at the same time at ease, Obon. It seemed it was just unfolding all by itself. Usually it's a very laborious and somewhat frustrating time of preparation, but this was quite extraordinary. And by Friday evening, I think we were 90, and Saturday, some people came for the day. I have no idea how many people were there, but it was so incredible. Of course, the weather made itself known. We had some rain, and we had the courtyard altar covered over with a tarp Thursday, and then Friday, it seemed it would be okay. We had the Friday opening fire. Saturday, again, some rain. It was kind of off and on. And so we were thinking, well, it'll be one of those obons where we may just need to have umbrellas for 100 people as we go down to the lake. But while we were sitting and while we were standing and chanting, I should say, the weather cleared. And when we went down to the lake with the lanterns, all of a sudden the clouds parted. It had started to clear. It became completely clear, and all the stars. And what do you call those things they shoot? Meteor showers. The Perseid meteor. Yeah, meteor showers were happening. I never see them, but people told me they did. And lightning. So there are these stars meteor showers, they tell me, and lanterns floating, and they didn't want to go anywhere. The lanterns were like, the spirits are here, we're staying here, and lightning. So at one end of the lake was bright white lightning. And then the bonfire started, and it was really quite wondrous. We had decided that because last year was kind of intrusive, we asked people not to take pictures with their cell phones throughout the whole event. And so the stars and the lanterns, that was the main event, not. And the feeling of this Obon was also, I would say, more intense than usual, because there were people attending who had lost loved ones over these past 3.5 years, who had not been able to be with them, or had not been able to feel that they were putting their spirits to rest. There were people here who had lost loved ones, like you recently. There were people who had asked to have those names recited. And there was just this sense of the broader Sangha all being there at the same time, and all of these losses being mourned for, and yet also a sense of healing. One woman told me that her mother had died earlier in the year, and she had been very close to her and had cared for her for many, many years as she was fading and finally passed. And she said, I've been walking around in this state of grief and I haven't been able to come out of it. And now I feel my mother is at peace. And I'm so grateful that you suggested I come to this event. And the very next day, on Sunday, we buried the ashes of Mia Ihara. Some of you may remember my speaking about her. She had been murdered in an anti-Asian crime. And again, her mother and sister who were there said, finally, after 3 years, after her passing in 2020, now we feel she is where she needs to be. She's home. So that interment of ashes on Sunday afternoon was really just a continuation of the intensity of Obon, and a sense of how important these ceremonies are. Mandala Day we do once a month, and most of you know the story, and I won't go into it now, but you can certainly, if you wish, read about it in the introduction to Endless Vow or Eloquent Silence, or Like a Dream, Like a Fantasy, the wonderful relationship that Soen Roshi and Yogin Senzaki developed and passed down to us. And all of the ancestors are on the altar. On the right are the ancestral teachers. On the left are lay people whose gift of caring and support made it possible for us to open in this extraordinary place. But the mandala that we observe, this being together in this spiritual interrelationship, just recently, we were looking at the shape that we've given it since the pandemic, when we've been marking it as part of the Threefold Sangha Zoom event. And there may be some people on Zoom now. So the timing has always been somewhat interesting when we actually start the talk, when it ends, what time we begin our chanting and when that ends. So we decided at one of our Tuesday staff meetings from, I think it's November on, we're going to begin at 9 a.m. to give us more time so that we have our service, then we can actually have a full sitting. Today, because I'm out of time, literally. Yeah. You had a nice chance to sit, right? No? You walked forever? Whoa, nice day for that. So you had a long kinhin. But like other things, we always try to set the structure so that it's helpful and gives us time for zazen. So we will change just that one meeting per month on a Mandala Day Sunday. It will no longer be the Threefold Sangha. Now we are meeting everywhere in person. So this is a big change. And so we cannot do the same schedule as New York Zendo, for example. Dabasatsu Zendo, right now they are in their third day of healing and wellness weekend, which is, again, like Obon, for people who have been struggling with chronic illnesses. Started out years ago with many people coming who were HIV positive, who were in very frail condition. So it's been going on for how many years since Dongye? 30 some years. And now we have other people with chronic illnesses, not just people who are HIV positive. And it's a wonderfully loving time because people come who are in this cycle of suffering in their lives, and people come who are practitioners of various healing arts. So they offer their body work and psychological support to whoever comes. And that's where Jishin and Keisho are today. So Obon, healing and wellness. And I was remembering the service that we did, a 49-day service for Jumpo Dennis Kelly Roshi on July 2nd, 2021. Again, it was at a point where we weren't sure how much in-person practice we could do, but we had this hollow bones Sangha coming, everybody wearing masks. We did the service outside, interring his ashes. And the very next day, we learned that the first priest Jumpo Roshi had ordained had passed away. I doubt that many of you would know Vimala Muni John Nemick Roshi. He suffered from kidney disease and was awaiting a transplant. And he was able to attend Jumpo Roshi's funeral 49 days before that service that I just spoke of. And no one realized how close he was to his own death. But I wanted to just share a few words about him because he was quite remarkable, and it has some bearing on where we find ourselves today. He was a social worker, a teacher, a therapist, and a Zen priest. And he worked with something called the Truth Program for more than 20 years, helping incarcerated men all over Wisconsin find freedom within. He founded the Green Tara Sangha. Now it's called the Green Bay Zen Center. And some of you may remember Zwiken, who was a resident at DBZ for quite a while. And he once asked Vimala, how did you get your Zen center started? Vimala Roshi replied, just light the candle. Show up. No matter what. Just keep lighting the candle. So this candle is lit. It's blown out again. And it's lit again. And all of us keep showing up. We are brought to this place, to Daibosatsu, to other Zen centers, and it seems as though we may be leading separate lives, but from the fundamental perspective, we've all been on a bodhisattva pilgrimage together, long before we even met. So this feeling of reopening that we've experienced over the past year and a half or two, bringing with it, as I said, a sense of healing, and finally able to not only put our loved ones to rest, but ourselves, to really understand this pilgrimage as home. Each step is home. One of the things that's happened is, like many of you, I have not engaged in many public activities other than those at Daibosatsu, and to a limited extent in this community. But yesterday morning, I attended services at synagogue, Beth Shalom Shavashas, and there was a sermon, a short sermon that was given by the rabbi, and he in turn spoke about another rabbi who lived many, many decades ago and was one of the first people. This is just at the very beginning of air travel, one of the first to go to China. And when he was in China, the first few days, the only transportation in the city was by rickshaw. You know what rickshaw is? Huh? What?
It's a cart that a person pulls you in.
That a person is making move. Yes. And he said during those first few days, he was so aware of the rickshaw pullers or peddlers. I think maybe they use like that. I don't know. Anyway, however they make these things go and carry people. He was so aware of how difficult it was. He said all he could hear was the moans of the person who was making this rickshaw move. He said after 3 days or so, he was no longer hearing it. And I was thinking how this is so true for everyone, really, that you become aware of something grave, something very painful, something that leads to intense suffering. How many of you think about Katrina every day now? Hawaii happened. For a while, we'll be thinking about Maui, and then we'll be inured to it. And then the next thing will happen. And for many of us living in Syracuse, everything's at a remove. All these crises seem, this is wood, to be taking place elsewhere. It'll be our turn. We will have a terrible storm. There will be something very dramatic that occurs that we have to endure. But for the most part, these fires, these floods, these agriculture destroying droughts are not happening here. We get the smoke sometimes. So it's coming our way, but not in such an extreme way that we are actually brought to the point of sharply being, what would be the word? Confronted by it, exposed to it. Devastated. Yeah, devastated by it.
We were just missed by a tornado.
Yes, the tornadoes, for example. When we were preparing, we were eating the obon meal on Saturday. And Chigon was sitting there, Shinge Roshi was sitting there, just like you, looking at his phone. And he said, well, there's a tornado to the left of us, and a tornado to the right of us, and a tornado to the south of us. We're about to set lanterns on the lake. You know, so, wow. It was more than just the rain. I just remembered about that. Yeah. So, yes, it is an extremely fraught time, and it's so easy to get inured as the, might say, the hellfires rage across the planet. And as we become aware that the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance are literally destroying our home, this Mother Earth. And so, what does that mean? We can't really allow ourselves to be inured to suffering. We are called more than ever to be emissaries of Green Tara, of Jizo Bodhisattva, who goes into hell to bring relief to all those who are suffering there. Kanzeon, who hears all cries. We too are, when we chant Kanzeon, Even when we are walking around worrying about something and we immediately change that worried state to becoming one with Kanzeon by chanting, inner chanting. This is so important. So to realize our environment is in crisis, has become a hell realm, and our practice has never been more urgent. So in addition to that statement by that rabbi, I wanted to share with you something that I found. I never see the daily news. You know, so interesting. Somehow an issue of the daily news came with our New York Times last week. And so I was like, this is very interesting, this newspaper. It's very thick. It seems to have a lot more than most papers do. But one of the things that I found in it that was not in any other newspaper, as far as I know, was something by Leonard Green about the attorney and activist Clarence Jones, who was one of Martin Luther King's closest friends, and he was the one who really helped craft those speeches. He said, "I thought Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the greatest geniuses of our time, an imperfect person and a perfect calling. He was the one who helped craft the famous 'I Have a Dream' speech. And he remembered those days of preparation and exasperation as they were working on it with some other advisors, trying to find just the right words. And as we know, the speech was an incredible, searing, deeply affecting one. And then Leonard Green, the writer, says, even now, as America commemorates the 60th anniversary of the August 28th, 1963 March on Washington, 60 years. I'm going to be 80. I was there, so that tells me how old I was. It's another speech, he said, from that day that still resonates with Clarence Jones. He was drawn to the words of Joachim Prinz, a German-born rabbi who spoke out against the Nazi Party there before joining the civil rights movement in America. And Jones said his speech, in my opinion, is the most important speech other than the "I Have a Dream" one. He spoke just before King. Were you watching it on TV? Anyway, he was right before King. He was president of the American Jewish Congress. And Jones still remembers his words. When I was the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime, I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned under those tragic circumstances was that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problem. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. And Jones said, how prophetic. That's the message we should take away today. He ended with saying, the road ahead requires everyone to work together. Biggest concerns for Jones are gun violence and black-on-black destruction. If Martin were alive today, I would craft for him a speech called the black killing fields. Nobody is telling it like it is. So to really know how important it is that we do express our concerns, that we do have a voice, that we do work together, that we are needed in every possible way, and that the opening up in these years, this year, last year, after the lockdowns, is an opportunity for us to work together in very important ways. And there are so many of those ways. All you have to do is ask Jikyo, and she'll tell you what the next thing you can do might be. But it's also important for us to appreciate, as this opening up is happening, to appreciate what is done by those who are expressing their love through art. Last night, we had the most extraordinary experience. Myorin was kind enough to babysit for a favor so that Andy and I could go to the festival finale in Skaneateles and hear the Joshua Redman Quartet. I don't know if any of you heard Joshua Redman when he played at the Jazz Fest. I don't know, 15 years ago. He's the son of Dewey Redman, who was also a tenor sax player. And he got together this group, this quartet of other young, extraordinary players. He had a piano player, he had a bass player, and he had a drummer, and they were extraordinary. They really they had been prodigies. They had all gone to Juilliard. All of them came from families of musicians like Joshua Redman. And they brought that intense and beautiful togetherness, and the whole audience, you looked around, it was kind of mostly a sea of white faces and old gray-haired people like ourselves, or when we had hair, and maybe 10 Black people in the audience. The whole place went wild. They all got it. The jazz that this quartet gave us was so vibrant. So no matter what, we're here together. We're going to do this thing. And everybody was bopping around and shouting, not just clapping. So it was Joshua Redman on tenor sax, Paul Cornish on piano, Philip Norris on bass, Nazir Ebo on drums. Why am I telling you these names? Because other than Redman, you probably have never heard of the other three. And they will be heard from, not only if he comes back with his quartet, but in each, one lives in LA, one lives in Philadelphia, one lives in New York, or two in New York. Something that was so powerful, that's so seamless, that's so dramatic, that gave everyone the sense that we are here, alive, together, and we're going to make this the way we work together in the community, in the larger world, not to be dragged down, but to be inspired and to inspire others. Thank you all for being here.